What's up, everybody? This is the poker coaching study session. Today, we're going to be looking at a blind v blind spot, and we're going to be looking at the small blind strategy after he limps at 30 big blind. And we want to focus on all the exploit we can do from the small blind. So let's get started. So first off, as we see, like at GTO, we're supposed to be checking 75% of the time from the small blind when we limp at 30 big blind. But even on those boards, like these are the boards we check the most on, and I think it's kind of very instinctive, right? Those are like really good boards for the big blind, low connected, but I think even on those type of boards, we can run a few exploits. So let's see. Um, say we have a board like 5-3 do. Okay. So 5-3 deuce at GTO, we're supposed to be checking almost with range, right? Because like 5-3 deuce, low connected, pretty good for the big blind. It all adds up. Then the big blind is supposed to be betting, I don't know, 45% of the time, 50% of the time, something like this, right? But I'm not sure if that's credible. I don't think people are really gonna go out of their way and start to bet like their worst hands here with like I don't know, 7 deuce off, 6 deuce off. I don't think people bet that often. So my question for you, like, what happens if we're playing against a player that doesn't find all the betting? So right away, we can see that out of position is already like starting to develop like a leading range here. So even on the boards that the small blind is supposed to be checking the most on, if our big blind is not finding all the value bets and all the like very, very thin bets in his range, our response to that, we can start to be disrespectful. We can start to bet into the big blind a lot. So we look at another texture. So this is King Jack 9 at GTO. So at GTO, we're supposed to be checking very heavily here, 96% from the small blind, right? And then the big blind is supposed to be betting. Uh, when we check to him, it's supposed to be betting 25% of the time. Now, what happens if as we see, we have a very, very small betting strategy here. So what happens now if we bet and then as we see when we bet here from out of position, our big line is supposed to be finding a whole bunch of raises. Supposed to be raising with stuff like queen deuce off here, which I'm not sure if it's really happening, right? I'm not sure if we get raised by 9 deuce off here or 10 deuce off here. So so what happens if the big blind doesn't find all the raise? So what ends up happening is very, very obvious. We go from a very heavy check strategy to a very heavy bet strategy, just because our opponent is not finding enough raise, right? So we can very easily exploit on these kind of boards. Uh, if we look at a board like Queen 3-3, this kind of board, like we're supposed to be checking from the small blind 98%. Like we're not supposed to be betting very much here, right? And then in position, that's a pretty good board for him, right? He's supposed to be betting a lot here most of the time, right? So the thing is, I don't think that people are gonna bet that often, right? I don't think people are gonna like bet all of their like thin junk here for deuce off, like 75% of the time. They're gonna bet, they're gonna bluff, but I don't feel like people are gonna bluff that often. So what happens is people don't bluff that often. You know, we leave like some of the worst bluffs in, okay? But if even then, if they don't bet often enough, what ends up happening is we go from a pure checking range, right? To we bet 22% of the time, a little bit with everything. So the pattern is very steady. If our opponent is making a mistake by either not betting often enough or maybe like not raising because if he's not raising often enough, let's see like another board like this is Queen 10-9, for example. We don't really have leads from the small blind. We have a very heavy checking strategy, but our opponent is supposed to be betting kind of often against us, right? Now, what if we bet and then he ends up not raising often enough because like if we bet here, he's supposed to be raising quite a bit, right? Quite a bit. So that's why we don't really get to bet. But if our opponent is not raising often enough, what ends up happening is we can bet in a lot more often with almost like a little bit of everything, right? And it's a pattern we see over and over. If our opponent is overfolding, we get to range bet. If our opponent is not raising enough, we get to also like bet more often than we should. So we can see like other textures. For example, let's find a good. So let's look at King Jack 9. Well, we saw a very similar one. Jack 4-4. Okay, King 10-9. Look at King 10-9. So on King 10-9, we're supposed to be checking what 95% of the time, and then he is supposed to be betting 30% of the time, and then checking 70%. You have a bit of a leading range, right? And not so much. Now, what happens if we lead like this and he doesn't find all the 10 raises? Like, I don't think people are finding all this stuff around here, right? I don't think people are finding all the flush draws here. So let's see what happens if he overfolds just a little bit. So say we bet 40, and then let's start with he doesn't find all the raise. So just a little bit less raising, just a little bit less. So how is our strategy changing when he has less raising? We end up betting more. So we go from what? This is no bets at all. What did we have here? What is it? So yeah, 5% betting, and now we have 30% betting, right? Now what if he ends up on top of not raising enough? Say he just overfolds, right? So if he overfolds, we just give him the business, right? Not raising enough, overfolding a little bit. There's a lot of stuff we can do from the small blind, the BVB. Very, very exploitative strategy. And against that, There we go. So let's look at another, look at 9-8. See what we can do on 9-8. 5-4. So a lot of checking on 9-8-4. There's a little bit of leading, right? And then if we check to him, he's supposed to be betting 40% of the turn, kind of using the bigger size, which I don't, kind of don't think people are finding on these textures. A BVB, when it's limp check, no one is really sizing up. I think the standard is just going to be one. I also don't think he's going to be betting that often. Now let's see what happens if we bet one. He's supposed to be raising quite a lot. Like there's very unlikely that people are raising us that up. So let's see what happens if we bet one and then he's not raising often enough. Whoa. So calm down, follower. We just want to bet one here. So the bet is gonna be one. Yeah, like those texture like 9-eye, you kind of want to be polar, right? So I understand why it just wants to rip with some of its range, right? But say we just bet one, and then he's not raising often enough, right? Because like people are not really raising for deuce offer, right? I'm not really raising like queen five off with the queen of hearts. I mean, some of them are like people that study a lot, but anyhow, if people don't raise enough, so half less raising, let's see how our strategy changes. So we go from kind of a very small, a very heavy checking strategy to now see how disrespectful we can be with our one big blind bet. If just people are not raising often enough, right? And then now, what if they just overfold? Overfold a little bit too? It's gonna be even more, right? It's gonna be like even more. So there's so many textures on which it's gonna be very, very tough for the big blind to defend. Let's see another one. Hmm. We look at the ace queen deuce mode. So we do have some leads at GTO. Then against those leads, it's very little raising. Okay. Which I don't think it's the case because I feel like when the big blind is gonna have a flush, it's gonna raise a lot, especially the low ones, right? People don't want to get outdrawn here. So I feel like here he may raise a little bit more than he should. So let's see first. What if he raise more than he should? What does that do to our strategy? Say we bet one, and then he ends up raising more often. That's a lot. Let's raise a little bit less, but raise more with the flush. So how does that change our strategy? Here also, I think it's important to have like a really small, like really small size. So we end up still betting with a little bit of everything, right? Not much, but I think if he overfolds a bit, can he calling like single hearts? What is this? 8-4, calling all the flush cards seems good. Yeah, maybe it's a little bit thinner on those monotone boards. Because it's tougher to make a mistake, and then like I think the mistakes people are gonna make, it's gonna be tougher to take advantage of. Let's see, 7-6-3, which should be that one should be a great board for the big blind, right? 7-6-3. At GTO, we should be checking so much, right, from the small blind. Now let's see. There is a little bit of betting, and then it's not really using the small five, kind of going for two for protection with and value with the sevens. Um, so say we just go for one. Oh, it's supposed to be raising quite a bit here. And I think we can kind of confidently say, like, who's gonna raise you with three deuce off, right? Feel like no one is really gonna raise that often. So what happens if he doesn't raise often enough? So say we bet one, and then in return, he's not raising 21%. It's more like raising like 10%. We can see 9% will do. And even then, that looks ambitious. So he's not raising often enough. Oh, look at that. So even on those low connected flush draw boards, if our opponent is not raising often enough, we can very easily range bet one, and then we simply bank it up. And also don't think like people are gonna be able to call as wide as a solver. So definitely gonna overfold. And then if they overfold a little bit, it's gonna end up happening. I believe it's like the checking range is gonna vanish completely. They overfold just a little bit. On many textures, we can actually run those exploits. Um, see Queen Jack 8, we can do something. So Queen Jack 8, we should be checking what? 90%. There's a little bit of leading, almost nothing. But if we lead, what's going on? So definitely villain is not raising often enough. Can't remember the last time somebody raised me with 8-5 without a heart here, or 8-4 without a heart. I mean, maybe, and then I don't see it, but I think people raise more like the king of hearts here, right? Or like even then, like that's kind of tough to find. So I think like most people are not gonna raise often enough here. So if we bet one, like, hmm, We go for one. Then our opponent is not raising enough. And then overfolding in a little bit. Okay, so let's lower this one first. Not raising enough. So already, if he doesn't raise often enough, we lead with more and more and more. And then if he's overfolding, we lead more and more and more and more. And another nice board to run an exploit on. Let's see, king nine, seven. That should be kind of similar to the one we just saw, but let's see anyway. So king nine, seven, we're gonna have like what? 8% lead. Then if we lead one, oh. So I think here, like raising 8%, kind of a narrow raising range, although like people don't raise with 10 deuce. So definitely like, they don't find the low equity, zero pure bluffs here for sure. So let's see. Opponent is not raising often enough, for sure. So first, we make it one, which allows us to do it a little bit more. And then our opponent not raising often enough. Say we make it like 7, just a little 6, just a little bit less. So block, and then they also like overfolds by I don't know, like 10%, right? 35 instead of 25. So he overfolds a little bit, doesn't raise often enough, like kind of a passive player, like exactly what most people are doing, right? So against a more passive player, we are so disrespectful. We just have fun over and over. We do it over and over and over.
God.
Yeah. So let's say another texture. Queen Jack nine rainbow. Let's see, Queen Jack nine.
Louis, was the change there that if he under under raises and under
I'm gonna do
defends,
it.
we just bet everything? We bet range?
You're gonna see. I'm doing it over and over again. So
Right.
this
But that
is
is
it.
what that's
Yes. So if we bet one, if he overfolds a little bit, we get to range bet. And then if he doesn't raise often enough to our bet, we get to almost range bet. So say we bet one here, and then let's see, like here, like raising 11% of the time. I think 10x people are gonna find a 10 here, right? But are they gonna find an 8-5 off? I don't think so. 8-6, I don't think so. So
they might call him. They weren't going to raise
probably
him.
probably not enough raising here. So let's see what happens if they don't raise often enough. Hit one, and then counterpart is he's not raising often enough.
Hey, Scotty,
Yeah, yeah.
13 to what?
you want anything?
Say
Like,
we make it
Hold on 1 second.
less raising. So against less raising, we end up betting a lot more often, right? And then if he also overfolds by 10%, then that's not much, right? Who's gonna really call us with like ace three off here? Seriously. Who's gonna like just float ace high, ace three off on queen jack nine, right? It's dry, it's rainbow, like king something something, like I get it, but on three connected like this, who's gonna call you with ace deuce, right? Or who's even gonna raise ace deuce? Honestly, let's be honest. Okay? And this is not really happening. So if our opponent is overfolding a little bit and then not raising often enough, well, we can run a pretty nice exploit here on this texture. Let's see another texture.
Lou,
Yes, sir.
are you just looking at his fold to c bet stats to know how much he's folding?
I'm just making assumptions. Let's do it again together, shall we, Andy? So Jack
Yep.
10-7, okay? Jack 10-7. Jack 10-7, as we see here, GTO checking 88% of the time, right? So we're gonna lead like what? Like 10%. Alright, almost no leading. So people would say check range here, it's probably fine. Okay, but if we bet one, is he raising often enough? Right? So do you think people are raising 9-3 off here? Like without the heart? Nine of diamond, three of clubs. I don't know. I think my most flashy opponents are gonna find half of that. Half of the bluffs, probably, right? If they're really creative, they're gonna find like those like I'd say like the ace of hearts here, probably, right? Whereas the ace of hearts actually just a call and you're actually raising every other one. So you see this strategy here, not very likely to be happening, right? So say we face an opponent that when we bet one, wait, let's solve it. So first off, like by default, the solver wants to pick 40%, which is 1.2, but we're trying to keep our structure simple so we can apply our system over and over again. So we were gonna go with one. So if we go with one, and then our opponent don't think we're finding all the bluffs, right? He may find a bunch of value hands, probably not all of them, but let's see. So the raising range, like we just trim it, like you're supposed to be raising 15% here, right? So if we tone it down to 9%, like 6% less raise, so it's raising a less of everything, right? So a little bit less raising. So our strategy go, if he raises less, he goes from we were betting 10% to now we're betting 40%. Okay, so if he just doesn't find all the raise, we go from betting 10% of the time to betting 40% of the time. And now, say we bet one, and I mean, if we're honest, okay, eight deuce suited of clubs there, maybe, right, it's a straight card. But ace deuce of clubs there, I don't see happening. Or like, 9-6 off, gut shot, okay, I see happening. Jack, that's a pair. Queen 6. Yeah, I don't think people are gonna call often enough with their queen X. So I think they're gonna overfold on this area. They may overfold a little bit of ace high, right? So we may find a little bit of overfolding, but not so much. So instead of like, say you overfold 5% only on this zone, because it's more connected and with the flush draw, it's kind of easier to defend, right? So what kind of exploit can we run on them? still, we can bet quite a lot, like almost half of the time. So like the more middling connected it gets, like the less you can kind of run those exploits because it's easier for him to defend, right? But on many boards, like so it's all about figuring out if you can, because like if we look on like King 8-7, I'm pretty sure that we can exploit them hard, right? Because it's gonna be kind of tough for him to defend with like a naked queen eye, for example, or a naked like jack eye, right? So say here we bet 10%, right? He's gonna have to defend with like some queen 4 offsuit, queen 5 offsuit, a naked like jack eye, like those like it's gonna be so tough for them to defend with that, right? So if they can't defend that often, gonna allow us to do it more. So instead of like 24% folding, say it just goes like overfold by 10%. And honestly, everyone here is overfolding by 10%. It's almost impossible to defend like a solver. This thing is like the stickiest thing in the world in them. So if we overfold, we just range bet. And then that, like how much, let's see, how much overfolding do we need to do for it to be a profitable range bet? So this is like 5% overfold. If he's overfolding by 5%, okay, 5%, we can range bet can be very disrespectful and range bet. I mean, this is almost like money in the bank because who's gonna not overfold by 5% to you, right? Very tough to, but again, it depends on the texture, right? Let's see 10-8-6 rainbow. So on 10-8-6 rainbow at GTO, we only lead 10% of the time. Then if we lead 10%, let's see the strategy. Okay, so definitely people are, I don't think really calling with like king deuce of spades here, neither are they raising with it, right? So I think that spade, king eye, that's a bit of a fairy tale. So definitely people are not gonna be raising often enough on this node. And I also think people are gonna overfold. Who's gonna call with king 5 of spade here? Like the big float with queen 5 of spade? Hmm, not likely, right? So let's see what happens if they just slightly underraise. So first off, make it 1. And then instead of 8, let's make it, I don't know, 5, right? No, 5. So 3% less raising, very little bit of less, like very few less raises, right? And then just a little bit of overfolding, like say like 26%, 5% more fold. 3% less raise, 5% more folds, just a little bit more passive, just a little bit more like risk averse, very likely like population. Against that, close your eyes, bet 1. You're exploiting the guy on almost every texture. right? Now the thing is, I think you're gonna be, you have to be ready to fire another bullet, small again, like 40%. I think that's gonna be very, very effective. Let's see another texture. Jack ten eight.
So playing against, so Louis, playing against someone who is not great, but reasonably observant, how many times do you think after you've limp called and then you just bet one that they start to respond by calling range just to see what you do on the next, just float everything?
Never.
Okay, you think that they don't catch on to this?
No,
Okay,
they just don't.
okay.
So, well, I mean, if you're playing like, like really, really good players, they're gonna catch on pretty fast, right? You're gonna get counter exploited. But say like if you're playing a live game, like no chances, they catch on to it. If you're playing like a tournament under $200 online, it's probably very little chances anyone catch on to it, right? If you're playing like online 1Ks, like I mean, like I think like you're probably gonna get smashed if you do that over and over again, right? Like if you're doing it against really great players, I don't know, but against population, against most poker player, it's gonna be a fantastic strategy. That's for sure. So let's see. I don't think people are raising often enough on this texture, right? Nine, there's a lot of weird stuff raising here. Seven deuce off. I don't know. So I think 2 or 3% less raising here. So let's start with that. A little bit less raising, a little bit overfolding. One, he, so let's say you go 9%. Then of 13, no lock. Then we renote it to, instead of 29%, he's gonna fold 35%, 34%. Against that kind of strategy. Magic. Can range bet even on this texture. So far, the only texture that was kind of tough to do it on was the monotone board, right? Every other texture, we found a way to find a good exploit. Let's other textures. So we saw a bunch of low boards. We saw a bunch of king eyes, queen eyes, jack eyes, 10 eyes, 9 eyes. Not many ace eyes, right? Not many like kind of like ace, flush draw, two low cards, or ace high low. So let's see those textures. Probably because the small blind is actually betting naturally those textures at GTO, right? Because the lower I go, the more bets we have, but it's still very heavy checks, right? So let's see. So let's see a queen 8-5 board. Queen 8-5. See if we can pull some exploits. So on queen 8-5, we actually lead from the small blind for overbet. So, all right, I guess. Not familiar with this strategy very much. So say we go for one, which is majority check or one or a little bit. Oh, definitely not raising often enough. And then can we say people are gonna overfold? I'm gonna call you with 10 deuce suited here. Definitely overfold. See? So, okay, the machine wants to just 2x spot on the flop, but that's not what we're working on. Or we're gonna go for one. So already one is a lot more popular of a strategy, using it on a lot more combos. So if we go for one and then he's not raising often enough, first off, instead of 9%, let's make it 6, 3% less raising. So very standard, right? Very tough to find all those raising at on the south. And then if he's folding like a little bit more, like 29%, 4 or 5% folding, we just can exploit so much here. So if our opponent is not raising by just a few percent, like we're looking at all those textures, 3% not raising often enough, and then overfolding by 5%. Hey, 5%. Are we serious here? Okay. Who's gonna not overfold by 5%? It takes it like you know, like how wide the machine is, right? Let's see another board. Ace, Jack, Queen. So GTO is already betting 20% of the time, right? And against that, what's going on? Against that, see, now we're raising 5% of the time, so it's kind of tough to remove the raises now, right? 10x, king x, the straight card with a heart, I think those are easier to find. The good flush draw, so can't say like on this kind of texture, villain is gonna raise too often. Is it gonna continue often enough? So top pair, straight card, pair, straight card. Those are front door, back door. Okay. I feel like people are not really gonna continue often enough. It's like a 7-3 of diamonds here. I feel like 9 eyes are also not gonna call often enough. So let's see. What if our strategy is to go for one? And then our opponent is not playing great against that. He's overfolding. Let's see, 4% overfolding. So if he overfolds by 4%, we end up, see,
You actually went the other way. You did an underfold of 4%.
oh, maybe I messed up. Oh yeah, that's what I did, right? So 36. Yes. Say 36. Say
Yes, it was 36.
Ooh, again, 4% overfolding. Okay, let's see, 3% overfolding, 35. Okay, so 4% overfolding, we can range bet. 3% overfolding, we can almost range bet. So that's where the bar is, I guess. If he's overfolding by 4%, which is such a 10 air, right? 10. Okay, so let's see a ace high, low board. I haven't seen much of. Can we run an exploit here? So we're already leading a quarter of the time here, and then if we lead a quarter of the time, no way they're raising 17%, 18%, so that's not happening. And then queen six, okay, front door, back door. Okay, fine. Fine and well. Queen seven off with the seven of hearts, I don't know. I don't know about that. Jack eight. I don't know about Jack eight here. Clearly overfolding and on the raise. Let's see. Okay, so say 14%, 3% less raising, which I think is way too generous. Honestly, if we're honest here, way too generous. But still, and then let's go by the floor, like folding 22%, 4% more. Again, way too generous. I don't think people are really gonna find that. And again, just those few adjustments. Now go to our leading strategy double. Just if he raises, what is it, 3% less? And then folds 4% more. Right, now let's make it 12 instead of 14. So just a little bit less raising now, and even more and more. And the more passive your opponent is in the big blind, the more you can run this exploit on almost all the textures. All right, that's gonna be it for today for the first part of this little show. So thanks a lot for watching, everybody. If you're not watching on YouTube, make sure to like, subscribe, and see you guys around.